Okay, so guys, I have opened up the chat. If anybody wants to say hello, feel free. Just make sure you check the everyone box when you're sending the message. Maybe you can all say who you are, what your brand is, maybe, and definitely anything that you're excited about learning. I am super pumped about this particular webinar. Probably anyone who knows anything about me knows that I am a data nerd. I'm currently wearing a hat that says I love data, which is a Nielsen hat. And just I was the head of analytics and insights for a food tech company for 5 years. And so I go really deep on data. I love panel data, and it's something that we haven't really explored much with the startup CPG community, which we should because Nielsen has all this amazing panel data. And so this is really the first time that we're ever actually getting into it. We've got our friend Cara Golberg here, and I have just been getting more and more excited over the last couple of weeks as I've been seeing the stuff that Cara is going to be presenting to you guys. My goal for this presentation was always, Cara, drop the good stuff. I want all of the brands who are on here to just be like screenshotting this and writing things down so that when they go into their presentations with the retailers, they've got some really good nuggets, like even if you're not a brand with $1 million data budget, like there's going to be some good stuff in here that you can put. And I think for me, my goal was always going into a retail pitch just to have a story that really made sense. And the data helps it make sense in the buyer's mind so that you have kind of a tight story about it's supporting the things that you're saying about your product and why it plays such an important role in a growing category and is going to complement their set so well. And because most of the people in our community are working on better for you type products, I thought this was the perfect topic. So, Cara, thank you so much for going out into the Nielsen IQ data universe and grabbing some really useful data and insights. And I think everybody's going to appreciate getting a little bit of an intro into what panel data is also, as well as seeing some real data in here that you can use. And we will be uploading the recording later onto our YouTube, so you don't have to write absolutely everything down. So, Cara, do you want to maybe just start by introducing yourself and what we're going to be talking about today?
Yep, definitely. Like Daniel said, my name is Cara Golberg. I am a solutions consultant at Nielsen IQ, cover all things consumer panel data. So whether that's our home scan, traditional brick and mortar panel, or omni shopper panel, which is really where a lot of this data will be coming from today, which covers both the same shopper in-store and online. When I started at Nielsen IQ, I was supporting a large manufacturer, and so really got to see how we're utilizing data today and different data sources from Nielsen IQ. Love consumer behavior. I'm sure you'll see my passion come through with it here. So really excited to support all of you in the better for you functional beverage space. And like Daniel said, give you some tidbits today that you can take to those retailers.
All right. Really excited to get going here. I feel we've got media here logging in the chat. I'm really excited to see all the brands here. If you guys have specific Q&A, you can put it in the Q&A box. Probably we'll try to get through most of the slides, but if there's something I think that's really pressing, I'll raise it. Otherwise, we'll circle back to stuff at the end. We got a big audience here today.
Perfect. Ready to get started?
Let's do it.
Awesome. All right, so Daniel gave a really great overview. I'm going to start off just high level a little bit. What does better for you mean? Kind of give you some information of why it'll matter to all of you. Then before we dive into all of the really fun data, I'm going to give you a level set of here's how we think about consumer panel data. Here's why it's important, different ways that you can utilize it. Of course, we're only scratching the surface. So always happy to continue conversations post just this 1 hour webinar. All right, so NIQ has given this term called better for. It's leveraging the most robust item coding in the industry, fueled by our NPI characteristics. It's qualifying brands based on a variety of different claims. It's an algorithm that identifies brands based on those product characteristics, whether it's positioning, sales, distribution, and it's for the food and beverage categories specifically. So better for doesn't just mean better for your health. It also means better for the environment, better for society. We'll talk a lot about the demographics throughout today of who's purchasing better for you. And you'll see that naturally it's going to be a little bit more of a younger consumer because Gen Zs, millennials, they care about not only what they're putting into their bodies organic, natural, plant-based, but they also care about having an impact on the environment and on the societies that they all live in today. So whether that's eco-friendly, bio-based, fair trade, fair wages, especially when it comes to coffee, things like that. Better for is a very broad term that we've coded here at NIQ and taken all of our product attributes that we have from all of the items and termed this specific segment. Why does this matter to all of you as emerging brands? A lot of you already in this better for you space. 62% of better for growth has come from emerging and smaller brands. That is huge. That means that retailers know that if they want to continue to innovate in their products, brands like you are the ones that they want to be focusing on. That's a huge point. 62% of growth coming from these smaller brands is incredible. And we don't often realize the impact that a smaller brand is having on the entire industry, but it's really fueling growth. We see that if we compare that to beverages, 16% of share of the omni universe for beverages is better for you, run by those smaller brands versus only 8% in that traditional trade. We have 14% of the salty snacks category, which we'll talk about at a little bit of a broader view, versus again, that 8%. So brands like you are really making an impact, and it's really important for retailers to not forego that and to understand that if they want to keep up with the newer generations and the newer buying powers that Gen Z is bringing in, with you is who they want to really focus in on.
And just to make sure we're following along. So when you say 16% of omni beverages means better for stuff in general, 16% overall for beverage versus traditional trade, which means all the stuff out there. So you're saying better for is really over-indexing on both beverage as well as salty snacks.
You got it, exactly. And omni being both in-store and online, the full channel view of wherever you're buying these products. So one more thing of like where we'll really dive in before I'll kind of take a step back is that better for you products are sold in every retail channel, right? Traditionally, we think it's the natural channel, it's Whole Foods, it's Sprouts, but it's a lot more than that. As you'll see here, if you're only focusing in on the natural space, you're missing out on your core consumers. 46% of the better for you share is coming from conventional grocery. So whether you're a better for you brand or have better for you products, you want to make sure that you're hitting these channels. But also if you're a more conventional product, it's important to note that better for you is still really important side by side next to your brands as well. So this is really important to note no matter where your product falls in the space of better for or conventional food and beverage. It's important that conventional grocery, 46% own better for you. And that's continuing to grow year over year. Mass merch follows warehouse. Then we do see that premier fresh, including Whole Foods fresh time. But what you'll see on the right is that Whole Foods makes up over 30% of that growth. So better for you is really Whole Foods in a lot of these markets, and 90% are falling outside of that natural channel for the better for you segment.
So just to make sure everyone knows what all these data points are, the left-hand column, that's better for share of each of these channels. So better for is 46% of conventional grocery. The next line is what is the growth or decline of that share change? So you can see it's growing actually in conventional in grocery, but like declining in warehouse clubs. And then the last column, index to total market share, that's saying like actually better for is growing faster in conventional grocery than overall. But if you look at some of the red numbers, so it's under indexed in mass merch. So you're not seeing as much better for in mass merch and value grocery, dollar stores, that kind of stuff makes sense since that's where you'd find kind of more conventional products. And then can you just explain a little bit more what the bullet points on the right mean again?
Yep, definitely. Before we hit that, just because you mentioned the index piece, indexes don't necessarily mean good or bad. It can also be an indicator of an opportunity. So we see that mass merch holds a high share, it's growing, but it's under indexing to the total market. Maybe that's an opportunity for a better for brand to go into Target and say, hey, you're under indexing, but you hold a lot of share. There's an opportunity for you to gain more products on your shelf. So different ways on both sides that you can kind of utilize those index metrics depending on what retailer you're talking to. On the right side, going back, Daniel, to that question, so 90% non-premium fresh sales. That means that 90% of better for you sales is occurring outside of that natural channel. Definition down here of kind of how we define that natural channel. So really, again, important that better for you isn't just a natural play, it's a total outlets play.
Okay, so just to make sure we are on that one. So 90, so for Premier Fresh Grocery, which is Whole Foods, Fresh Thyme, Sprouts, Trader Joe's, so the share for that for better for is 10%?
Exactly. Yes.
So the better for, so it's kind of surprising, no, that so you're saying better for in general actually under indexes in Whole Foods, Fresh Thyme, Sprouts, and Trader Joe's?
It over indexes naturally, right? Because the products that those retailers are holding are considered better for you. So it's over indexing, but when you're looking at where you as a better for you brand want to be putting your products, don't just focus in on the natural channel retailers because you're missing out on 90% of the other volume.
Okay, so but 90% of the share for Premier Fresh Grocery, which is those high-end ones, is not better for.
Say that one more time.
So 10% is the share of better for
Correct.
in Premier Fresh Grocery, correct?
Got it. No. So if this all adds up to 100%. So this is outlet
Okay.
share.
This is the breakdown of 100% of the pie. Okay, sorry.
Correct.
I'm glad. Okay, probably there are a couple people who were as slow as I was on that. So this is the total breakdown. So 10% of all better for you sales come from Premier Fresh Grocery. It's not the market share of better for at Premier Fresh Grocery.
Exactly.
All right, thanks. Sorry, everyone.
Ask these questions because I'm sure other people have them for sure. The middle piece we kind of talked about. So of this 10%, 30% of it is Whole Foods. So naturally, I'm sure we know, but Whole Foods is one of the largest. And so when it comes to better for you, Whole Foods is holding the most volume within that Premier Fresh Grocery space. So Whole Foods is important for better for you if we want to kind of double click into that 10% share. Then lastly, it wouldn't be a Nielsen IQ presentation if we didn't sprinkle in some different aspects. So it's 7 times more channels measured than our competition. We're really covering total outlets, total omni. You'll kind of hear me talk about that time and time again. But if you're just looking at the natural channel, you're missing out on all of the other conventional channels where better for you is growing. All right, now we're going to take a step back and really talk about how to think about consumer panel data before we dive into some of the nitty-gritties of functional beverages and then better for you snacking. Consumer panel data is used to diagnose performance. I'm sure all of you in some aspect are utilizing point of sale data today. That's perfect. We'll kind of dive into how the two align together, but you see your volumes up, you see your volumes down. What's driving that change? That's where panel data comes in to say, are your buyers shopping differently? Are they purchasing more frequently? Are they switching to another brand, another retailer? All of those different aspects to really drive the why behind any volume changes that you're seeing at your starting point. That's what retailers want to know, right? Like they know a category or a brand is up or down, but they want to know how is your brand going to help them push the category and push their overall dollar volume growth as well. And so that's where kind of that next point comes in is we're quantifying the composition of the category, the brand volume, what's driving that, how are consumer purchases changing over time, revealing the dynamics of those purchase behaviors. And whether there's a shifting, are you losing volume at a total level? Is it because of distribution or is it because consumers found a different product at a different price point that they like better? All of those different aspects is really where consumer panel data can help you double click and really diagnose some of those concerns. And then, of course, identifying appropriate marketing strategies, whether that's a demographic base or a geographical base, or even going after other brands in the space, panel data can really help you drive some of those strategies.
And just to give people if somebody hasn't heard of panel data before, basically my understanding, panel data is there are, let's say, 100,000 people or something around the country where Nielsen knows everything that they buy because they get all of their receipts, and it's just basically a representative group of consumers, and they're looking at everything that you buy. They're trying to understand, and they know the demographic info about the family, and who's in the household, the ages, the ethnicities, all of that kind of stuff. So when you're looking at the panel data, you're looking at basically the stats on that 100,000 group of people, which can be kind of extrapolated out.
Yes, exactly. The Omni Shopper panel that most of this data is coming from today, we start at 1 million panelists, and then we narrow down to that 100,000 usable panelists. All of the panelists align to the US Census demographically and geographically to ensure that we're aligning to what's truly occurring in the marketplace. And then, like you said, Daniel, we're getting all of the receipts in store, online, credentials from retailers, a lot of different places we're getting all of their purchase behavior from. I mentioned we're really going to dive into kind of, okay, I've explained how panel data diagnoses what you're seeing. On the left side is what we just talked about. We're understanding the reasons behind volume change, identifying marketing strategies, revealing consumer purchasing. On the right side is how it connects to your POS data. So in the blue, you'll see you have your volume trend drivers. You have your base, distribution, velocity, incrementality, price, all of those aspects. But how does that all affect the right side, which is how consumers purchase, where your distribution is, if your price is taken, all those things affect how consumers purchase. So you have two different routes of that where you can kind of really dive in. You have your penetration, obviously really important. We're going to talk a lot about that. All emerging brands, they want to grow their penetration, right? You need new buyers. You need buyers to come into the space. On the flip side of that, it's of those buyers and your current buyers. How much are they purchasing? How frequently? What's their purchase size look like?
Right, because the scan data, which is the stuff in blue, is great. You're seeing just totals there, though. You're seeing how many units did you sell that week. Maybe you can eventually get it to the store level or something like that. But what then you get on the right side, the consumer trend, this is of the people who actually bought it. How did they buy it? Where did they buy it? How often did they buy it? So really just digging into the actual people who got it and learning more about them.
Exactly. And you'll see here, we pulled a lot of different types of panel reports to get you all kind of comfortable. Of course, give you nuggets to take on, but give you a little different nuggets of ways that you can utilize the data. So you'll see really small, it says additional analyses you can run on all of these, but this is the basis of it's your volume drivers or it's your buyer drivers that are really kind of affecting it and how that trends over time. Lastly, how do you take all of this into action? Daniel and I have really talked about that first section, who's buying, how often, where they're buying, in complement of what. If they're purchasing a better for you salty snack, are they also purchasing a fresh item? Are they purchasing fruits and vegetables? You can really say, okay, who is that consumer when it comes to their purchasing habits? It's also understanding barriers to penetration. I hear a lot from emerging brands over the past 2 years. I've seen my penetration fall flat. What can't you see? What can't they afford? Is it not relevant to them? Not only is everything about what they've actually purchased, but we have the ability to take our panelists and survey them, ask them the questions that you're wondering and align it to their actual purchasing behavior. And then lastly, we're going to plan, act, and control. We're going to help you find those opportunities of where you can target new consumers, how you can protect your brand from shiftings from other brands and competitions, help you develop innovations, control and improve your current product line, and then, of course, different marketing tools and how that affects your buyers. Are we ready to dive into some of the insights? All right.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Perfect. We're going to start with better for you snacking, and then after that, we'll kind of dive into the functional beverage side of things. So what we've done here is we've looked at a starting point of that better for you segment that we already talked about, which is that better for you, better for the environment, better for society. And we've taken some of the top food and beverage categories. So you'll see here that it's the share as a starting point, and it's in very light gray down here, but you'll see that it's sorted by total category sales. The light shaded options kind of fall into that. For example, chocolate and confection fall into candy, gum, and mints. So the main categories are trending that way. Below, you'll see better for you share, whether that share is up or down. Then below that, you'll see total category sales if those are up and down. So that's better for you and conventional. I want to start with that bottom one, the category sales up or down. We see that
it's hard to balance that part because you know it is unrealistic. So,
did someone have a question?
please.
Alice, were you trying to say something? I'll just mute. I think she's on mute.
No, it is Mark. He's already.
All right, we'll keep going. But Daniel, let me know if questions pop up that I don't see. But across the board for food and beverage top categories, we see a lot of volume is up. Now you're like, okay, that's probably a lot of inflation price pieces. That's very true. And so then it's like, okay, how does better for you play a role in that? Not always, but oftentimes better for you offerings come at a premium price point. So that can also kind of take into contribution into some of these numbers. But in general, we're seeing better for you being priced very similarly to conventional more and more to make it more accessible to different consumers today. So across the board, we see better for you share continuing to grow in almost all categories. We see cookies and crackers down, cheese snacks down, diet nutrition a little bit down, but overall in the better for you snacking space, we're seeing growth for better for you. It's not
just
going,
just to try to summarize a little bit, because you're saying, so the overall better for is 15%, right? And it's
Correct.
growing in most areas, but you're saying it's under indexing in a lot of categories, which means there are certain categories where it's really over indexing. And you can see some of those leading ones, right? So that would be like snack mixes, yogurt, diet nutrition. So those are kind of leading the way, where the more like, that makes sense. Like yogurt. Okay. Yeah. We saw the like Chobani's and kind of more natural stuff really driving a ton of growth and reinvigorating the category. Whereas if you look at chocolate, okay, I used to work at Mars Chocolate. Like I know Snickers and like M&Ms and Reese's are still the bulk of kind of what's going on there. Is that a good way to think about it?
Yes, exactly. You're spot on. And there's a lot of innovations in those spaces too, especially in the candy, sugar-free chocolates. That's a whole, that's a huge space, the gummies space. So there's a lot of better for you continuing to innovate as you all know. So this just kind of level sets a little bit. We're not going to really dive in too much into some of this category information today, but just to give you a level set and kind of a lay of the land of how better for you is doing across different segments.
It is pretty interesting to think about why. So if you look at the cookies and crackers in orange here, so you have, kind of looks like around, 15%, kind of similar to the total, but then you have cookies, which is way under the average, and crackers, which is way over. So why is it that consumers out there are just so much more ready for the better for you options in crackers versus cookies? I don't know. It could have something to do with just the strength of those incumbent brands, or just the options are better in the natural ones. So I'd be, if I were a brand in that category, I'd be thinking about like, does that mean it's the opportunity then to really be the first ones to introduce those kind of options, or does it mean it's tougher in some of those categories because it just hasn't taken on? Probably it's somewhere in the middle, because if you wait until it's already so over-indexed, then there are just so many natural brands already out there, like in the yogurt category.
Definitely. I don't have the answer to that. So I was curious, Daniel, to hear your thoughts.
I don't think anyone does, but I think probably maybe we don't have the answer, but probably you can position that in your sales deck, whichever way you think it makes the most sense with your story.
Great point. I know Daniel and I mentioned this earlier too, but a lot of these data points can be taken either way, right? Like you can spin the data points to be one way or the other, just like the indexes, especially. It can be a good thing they're under indexed, or it could be maybe not the best story. So there's a lot of different ways that we can tailor these data points.
And then someone asked about that diet nutrition bar. Can you just go back one second? So when you did the transition, actually, all of the numbers showed up as well at the end. So we'll send out the recording in case anyone wants to kind of freeze to see what those numbers are. But that black line, Lucy, just means there's a break, and like it would actually be even higher overall. So like it's just it's not representative, like built to scale, because there's a break in the axes.
Thank you. Yes, I forgot to explain that. So before we specifically dive into the better for you consumer and who they are, I want to take a step back and say, who has the buying power across generations? I would guess if I asked a lot of you, who are you targeting? You're going to tell me millennials and Gen Zs. And you're not wrong, because those are who has the most buying power. So we'll start off first with the percent of dollars today. So who's spending of total US total store dollar volume? What generations are driving the most volume? You'll see in this yellow, it's boomers, which you're like, okay, interesting. Why is there no yellow on the rest of the slide? We'll kind of get to that a little bit. But you have boomers followed by millennials, Gen X, and then Gen Z is only 6%. Makes sense that Gen Z is smaller. They're just moving out of their parents' house. They're getting their own income, their own spending power. So they're continuing to grow. When we look at dollar growth to that point, we see that Gen Zs have jumped up to 29% of growth versus a year ago. And we see that boomers are not growing at all, right? We don't see that yellow bar. When we look over at the right, the one generation whose spending power or spend in general has declined is boomers, and it's being offset by Gen Z. Now, that's great, obviously, for total spending in the United States. But as we all can assume, what boomers are purchasing is very different than what Gen Zers are purchasing. So we all know, okay, we got to get Gen Zers via TikTok, via social media, but how are their spending powers different, especially when it comes to better for you, is really where we're kind of focus our attention today. Of course, we see millennials as their income continues to grow. They're off their feet a little bit more as well. We see a lot of growth coming from them too.
And how much? So some of this data, some of it is like them kind of just aging into the consideration set, right? And like a certain percentage of Gen Zers even being like over the age where they'd be making purchases like on their own, not being part of a household. So it's a tiny percentage. Should you think about it that way, or like the 6% that way is like there just aren't that many of them out there yet in the market? Or is it really they don't have a lot of money, like they're, in their first couple jobs, they don't have big families already, so they're not spending a lot, even though it's, the 6%, but growing at a pretty healthy clip? And then I guess conversely, boomers, like, I don't know exactly how to ask that, but like they're not growing. Is that, because they're not around as much, or,
Yes. In short, it's everything you said. Boomers aren't around as much. They don't need to purchase as much. They're empty nesters now. They just are living a different lifestyle when they were Gen X's ages.
So it is interesting for me because I think everybody talks about Gen Z a lot in marketing these days and like, gotta be on TikTok. Like, yeah, it's definitely growing in that way, but also like I think it's a good reminder of where a lot of the dollars are still being spent. So if there are some of you out there who haven't cracked TikTok yet, you still have a pretty good market out there that also has not figured out how to use that.
You're right. And exactly, it's like Gen X and Gen Y are still growing and they're still really important to the marketplace. You can't forget about them. Now, how does this compare, of course, to the topic of today of better for? So we'll see that the average index being 100, Gen Z and Gen Y, their dollar spend over indexes in better for you total beverage, total food, or for better for specifically. Now we're all probably like, yep, could expect that, because millennials and Gen Z, as we've already talked about, they care about what they're putting into their bodies and how it affects the environment and society. And all of those factors are really important to how this generation is spending their money. In fact, as the call on the right shows, it's 7% higher for Gen Z households increasing their spend on better for products faster than total panel is. They're faster to adopt is really that piece. And so when we're innovating, Daniel, you're right, Gen Z still has small buying power in comparison, but it's still a generation to keep an eye on because they're quicker to adopt in this better for segment, and they're willing to spend their money there. And of course, Gen Y, those millennials, they have that higher buying power already. And so they're over-indexing even higher in this space. I think we talk about generations a lot, but each generation truly wants to be marketed. They shop differently. And so I think it's a really important topic, especially in this environment of health, how these generations were raised differently and how they're purchasing and shopping and eating differently too. We're going to talk a lot in the functional beverage space and the better for you snacking about new and lost and retained buyers. To level set, what that means, a retained buyer means that a panelist purchased the category last year and then again this year. New buyers means that they didn't purchase last year, but they're purchasing this year. Lost buyers being the opposite. They purchased last year, didn't this year. When we look at who and what is driving better for you growth in the total snacking, which includes salty snacks, fruit snacks, yogurt, candy, cookies, and crackers, we see in this left bucket that the main growth driver is due to new buyers. That means that new buyers are entering into the better for you space. We know that it's most likely millennials and Gen Zs because they're over-indexing, and that's really where we know that their habits and interests are falling. So it's how do we capture these new buyers and make them retained buyers? We'll talk about this a lot more in the functional beverage spot, but your retained buyers are your most valuable buyers. So when we talk about, I need to grow my penetration, you do, but you also need to ensure that you pay enough attention to those new buyers that you convert them into being your retained buyers, because we still see growth coming from those retained buyers. So it says due to value per buyer. That means that those consumers, those retained consumers, are purchasing more than they did a year ago. Your retained buyers, they're trying your product and then they're like, wow, this makes me feel better about myself, about the environment, health-wise, and all of those different pieces. I'm going to put more money and more of my spending dollar behind these products. This is my favorite topic. If you can't tell, I love looking at the buyer turnover and kind of how that affects a business, because I think we really sometimes get stuck on one metric and growing that one metric. And it's a bigger picture, right? It's not just the only thing that's important to growing a category or a brand in itself. When we tie this back to retailer conversations, I would take this to one of my retail grocery partners and say, hey, I'm a better for you brand, and we're innovating and we're bringing in new buyers. So if you're trying to attract the similar consumers that I'm trying to attract, the category and the segment I'm playing in are doing just that, and we're driving more buyers, and we're driving higher retention rates on top of that. Of course, the other thing that retailers want to know is, are you driving more volume for my retailer? I'm going to put you on my shelf. Of course, I want your brand to do well, but I want to make more money. That's the end of the day. That's what these retailers want. So how is better for you driving a higher basket size? We don't see this, I will say, across all categories and across different product lines, but we're seeing 48% lift in basket size when better for you is in the basket versus a conventional snacking item. That's incredible. So if we look at this green bar is saying your basket value per trip, IB, meaning when it's in the basket, blue when it's not in the basket. This 48% lift is comparing the two greens of better for you snacking versus conventional snacking, sitting at about a $93 basket size and a $63 basket size. That's a huge differentiator. This is what retailers really want to know. I'm driving a higher basket size. They're purchasing more at my store when your product's on the shelf.
So somebody just going in the store, if they have any kind of a snacking product in there, they've got some chips or something already, that's a good sign for the retailer. Their basket size, like what's in their cart as they're walking out, is going to be bigger than if there's no snacking in there. Okay, that makes sense, and it's an additional category. But wait, if they're getting a better for you snack, like show the dollar signs, because they're going to be all the way up at $93 on average on the way out. And partly that's going to be maybe because they're like, oh, they are just higher income people. I don't know, like whatever like maybe higher education levels or just more income. They're buying more stuff, or they're shopping more expensive places, or the prices of these products are higher also. All of those kinds of things could drive the overall basket size up, but retailers love that kind of stuff, of course.
Yes, exactly. And we can pull this data at a channel level, at a retailer level too, to really kind of dive in. Okay, this is at total outlets, but what does it look like specifically at Whole Foods or at Amazon Fresh, in-store, online? We can kind of really dive in to be more specific to a retailer as well. That's all we have on the snacking side of things. Before we move on to functional beverages, were there any questions that we wanted to hit on?
Yeah, they've been coming in. Like we have 140 people all looking at data, so there are a lot of questions. I'm trying to consolidate them a little bit, but keep them coming in the Q&A portion if you have questions. So, I mean, one thing I'll say is that it's impossible for us to get through kind of everything that everybody wants to see here. Cara, can you just remind people, like, if they do actually want to go and get a specific panel set, I mean, panel data, is expensive, but like, what can they do if they actually want to try to drill down to their specific categories and get more precise data?
Yeah, definitely. A lot of different avenues we can go. I would say first, reach out. If you have a Nielsen IQ rep, reach out to them. They'll pull me in or someone else on my team. My email is at the front of this deck. It's at the end. And I think it's on the invite. So feel free to reach out to me, and I'm always happy to kind of talk through with you what data points might be best depending on what you're looking for and get you a little bit of snippet. And then, of course, we'll talk about this as well. We have a platform that really sits perfectly for emerging brands. It's a special value specifically for startup CPG members. Our platform is called 𝐕𝐢𝐽𝐻. It doesn't necessarily go into all of the levels of data that we're looking at today, but does have some consumer panel reports in there. So that's always an option as well. So reach out to your Nielsen IQ rep, Mark Santos, myself. We have all of our contact information at the end.
So I'll put in the chat now. I'm just about to hit send, but I'll put it in here with Cara's email address. I'll put Mark's email address, and then I'll put the link to 𝐕𝐢𝐽𝐻, where you can get 3 free reports with Startup CPG, which is a great thing to do if you're just trying to test the waters and even see what's out there in your category and get some great data to use for your retail sales deck. So I'll put the link for that again, and you can go get your 3 free reports. And now let's keep going with the functional beverage, the good stuff. I've got my functional beverage right here.
Very nice. So functional beverage is a little bit different than how we define better for. Functional beverage, you'll see on the left, I'll dive into what we're seeing, but it's all about the claim. So it's not just water, but it's water with electrolytes, or it provides energy, a health benefit, metabolism support, prebiotic, those types of things. That's all kind of what falls into this functional beverage space. So functional beverages, food as medicine and vitamins is really how it's being thought about. It's often the earliest indicators of emerging consumer wellness priorities. So we see up here at the top, provides energy is that #1 use case for functional beverages. We'll see kind of who these consumers are a little bit, but we're looking especially at millennials in a lot of spaces. So they're potentially younger parents on the go, have a lot going on. They're the Red Bull generation. That's what they grew up on, but they're looking for different alternatives to all of those pieces. So providing energy is the #1 use case for functional beverages today, but doesn't just obviously touch on that, touches on all of these different ones on the screen. We see obesity support is also highlighted up in blue. With GLP-1, we all know that's really a big conversation. And so how do we help our consumers really become the healthy lifestyle that they're looking for? On the right side, it looks at a 4-year CAGR, and we see that this food as medicine attributes are stronger than total food and beverage. So that touches on digestive health, metabolism support. You can kind of read down the list. And then of vitamins and supplements, if we're looking of different ways to innovate in this functional beverage space, mood, sleep, mental health, hydration, electrolytes, performance, those are some of those key pieces that our consumers are looking for. So now I mentioned who are these consumers? What you'll see here, we're looking at functional beverage consumers versus total beverages, including ready-to-drink coffee. These consumers aren't so different than the average beverage consumer. That means that we're potentially already capturing them. It's just potentially a different marketing strategy, or we're trying to attract different ways. Maybe it's what our label looks like to attract these consumers in a different way. But it's important to note that they're not that different. They're higher income. They're more likely to be higher income than a total beverage consumer, but in general, still higher income. The biggest difference being that household size. I think of a functional beverage consumer is a millennial mom on the go with her kids. She's going from point A to point B. She's got to quickly grab her functional beverage, give her energy to get to all of her kids' practices, schools, her own job, everything she's got to do. So that's a big differentiator there. But they're still millennials. We see those boomers, which we've kind of noted, they're on the decline. So don't forget about them, but don't put all of your marketing efforts towards them. And then the ethnicity still sits in our white consumers for all beverages, but still for functional beverages.
Can you just remind everyone what functional beverages means? Like when I look at that, I think of like mainly canned, like, some people call it RTD, like ready to drink beverages that have some kind of a functionality claim. So you're probably like, what wouldn't be in there might be like a, red Coca-Cola or something, because I don't think there's much of a functional claim the way that they market, but probably you would see like a Poppy in there because they do have a functional claim. And obviously like energy drinks. And is that a good way to think about what would be in functional?
Exactly, yes. And I think another one is like ready to drink Starbucks. That might not necessarily be functional, but the double shot, that would be considered functional because it has that added energy boost. But yep, it's all about the claim on the package.
And it's RTD specifically, like in cans, not like, yeah, basically. Yeah, because it wouldn't be like bagged tea and bagged coffee and stuff like that.
Oh, yes, correct. Yep,
Right.
yep.
And Cara, a few people are asking just about the deck. Are you okay if we send out the deck afterwards?
Yep,
Okay,
definitely.
great.
We can definitely send out this information.
Good stuff.
All right. We talked a little about new lost retained. I know there's a lot of big numbers, so bear with me. Talked about a new lost retained and how new buyers were bringing them into better for you snacking. That's so important. But I mentioned that retained buyers is the most important buyer that you need to have in order to have a sustainable business. You'll see up at the top that retained customers are just as crucial and just as crucial as acquiring new ones. Increasing customer retention rates by just 5% increases profits by 25 to up to 95%. Retained buyers, they become loyal to your brand or to your item, and they will continue to spend more. Word of mouth marketing, we know, especially in the social media era, is the way to gain new buyers. But how do you keep those buyers in? Functional beverages is doing a really great job of that. So that first number sees that of the total functional beverages category, 96% of those buyers that are purchasing in the last year are retained buyers. So they purchased a functional beverage last year, they purchased a functional beverage this year. That is incredible. We saw the year before, actually, the retention rate was 98%, so slightly less, but it's continuing to be a really high retention rate. So now's a great time to innovate. We know these consumers are loyal to the category. So how do we make them loyal to your brands or your specific attribute even, is different ways that we can kind of dive in.
And this is about their loyalty in the overall category of functional beverage. So, not specific to one brand, but like, hey, if they like one functional beverage, they're buying that or other functional beverages. They're not just deciding, oh, I'm going back to water. I'm not going to buy any more of this stuff. So they're staying in the category overwhelmingly is what you're saying. And can you put that 96% in like context for some other categories? Are there others that are much lower? Is it like just a little bit higher than other stuff? Is it way higher than other stuff?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm sure you all hear this. It depends on the category, really, but this is almost never seen. I would say a 70% retention rate across like an average category, if it's a lower level category, is really strong. And so if we're looking at anything over 95%, you're capturing these consumers on a year-to-year basis. That's truly incredibly high.
I mean, it makes sense to me, just like, I've been in beverage a long time, that like someone doesn't just wake up one day and decide to try a Poppy and they've only ever had Red Coke before, Diet Coke before that, and then they never have it again. Like, yeah, people are coming into this category to stay, whether they're staying with, that or moving to a different product. Like they're very curious about just overall functions coming from beverage in general.
And I think it's that mindset too that kind of talked about of the claim. It's like, okay, they love Coke, right? But now they're looking for a healthier option. It tastes great. They're going to continue on with it. or if it's even like an on-the-go change of lifestyle that they need a functional beverage that's tasty on the go and healthier for them and all those different aspects. One thing that would be really interesting to look into is, what does this look like for a specific brand? My guess would be that the retention rate per brand isn't necessarily as high, but there's a lot of cross purchasing. Those who like functional beverages aren't just going to purchase, I don't know, Propel and never purchase a Poppy. They're probably in for the health claims and all of that. And so they're probably purchasing a lot of different brands in the space.
Just a couple questions. So someone asked, do you think this includes powdered drinks? You know, you have like, actually, I'm drinking one right now. I've got like the Noon Hydration tablet in here. Do you think it includes those? And like, you know, you have like the Celsius energy packets, that kind of stuff?
Good question. These numbers do not include those powdered packets.
Okay. That would be probably under like diet and nutrition or something, or.
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
Okay. Any questions like that also, feel free. I just posted the link again to follow up directly with the team for consultation. So you can click there and they'll be happy to kind of get on the phone with you and try to deep dive into specifically the category you guys are interested in. And somebody had asked also, is there a functional beverage specific category in 𝐕𝐲𝐬? Because they were having some trouble finding it. Is that like a segment or something that you can check, or it's just the summation of a lot of claims that you guys have put together as a custom segment?
Yep, exactly. It's aggregate of a lot of different claims that we put together, so not a syndicated definition quite yet.
So you won't be able to select it and just kind of see everything that's within functional beverage. It's a custom thing that they've created. So if you're basically, what you all would have to look for is just the specific category that you're in, whether it's energy or coffee and tea or that kind of stuff.
I think that also helps take away some of the noise too, right? If you're not playing in the metabolism space, we don't need to pay attention to kind of how those buyers are consuming the products on a day-to-day basis. So really focusing in on the part that you want to be playing in. All right, so of these retained buyers, if we look at that 8%, our retained buyers, again, just like we saw in Better For You snacking, retained buyers are spending 8% more than they were a year ago. This contributes to those retained buyers. They become loyal, they spend more, they continue to invest their money where they find love for the products. And so again, we want to be bringing in those new buyers, but it's how do we ensure that those new buyers become those valuable retained buyers? Lastly, these retained buyers are spending $227 a year on functional beverages alone. Maybe that didn't surprise any of you all, but that surprised me. That is a lot of money per household that's being spent on a functional beverage. Not total beverages, just these functional beverages. That's up 8%. Lastly is the increase in buyer turnover. So of course, naturally, categories, brands are going to lose buyers, but what is that turnover rate? We want to ensure that we're bringing in new buyers. Functional beverages is still bringing in new buyers, and it's overturning those lost ones 149%. So again, how do we turn those really important new buyers into those retained buyers? I believe this is my last slide before we really get into Q&A, but again, the basket size, I feel like we all love this, retailers love this. It's not as strong as we saw with Better For You snacking, but functional beverages is still driving a higher basket size than all other beverages. We see a 13% lift in basket size. So again, Better For You snacking is a little bit stronger, but this is still a pretty big number. We're looking at, I think that's about like $72 versus $63-ish. So we're still driving a higher basket size for those consumers who are purchasing functional beverages.
So probably a strong story there if you have a story about your beverage upgrading people from conventional beverages into functional, just to increase the overall basket size. We've gone through a lot of the questions so far, and I've answered a bunch. If you guys have ones that you feel like we missed that you want to ask again, please pop it maybe newly into the question and answer, because there are just so many. We've got 140 people firing away with a pretty dense data presentation. I thought maybe one more slide we could go through is in the appendix. I know you have a slide that just goes into panel detail more. If you could flip to that, I would love to just tell people like, okay, If you, so yeah, this one, perfect. So if you, use that link and reach out to the team, what are all the things that you can look at for panel? Because I've spent a lot of time digging through panel data, trying to find the right story to tell to a retailer. And so this shows all of the different cuts that you can kind of look at. And so like, markets and outlets, like if you're looking at category data, you can look at it for omni, like everything, but you can actually also cut it down to only look at Whole Foods. Like, okay, maybe my product isn't selling so much where you would have enough data on my product, but I can look at the category and I can look at the competition. Like if you wanted to see data on Poppi, for example, and even cut it down to probably just Whole Foods, you probably could. The sample size is probably big enough where then you can see how people purchase it, not just in the overall national channel, but also how do people purchase Poppi at Whole Foods. So that's the kind of cut you could actually request if you're, for whatever reason, that is something that would help your personal data story, and look at it versus other brands as well. The demographics and buyer groups, you can drill down and see, just I'm going to continue with that example since I'm stuck on it now, but like, yeah, who is actually buying Poppi versus Olipop versus, Celsius? Like how does the makeup of the household change, the household size, like the average age, where are they? And does that differ by region? Because there may be stories in there that you want to use. And then for products, you can do it at the brand level if you want to just look at Poppi overall, or you could even dig into just looking at the SKU level if you wanted to do that. Or if you want to maybe even just try to educate a buyer on who's buying a category versus a different one, you can do it that way. So like, yeah, I want to talk to you today about, who buys coffee versus who buys, energy or whatever it is that you're looking at. And that can also be helpful if you're talking about why your product resonates so much in that category. Like really, this is the category buyer. It lines up with all of the research that I have. Maybe you're complementing it with other research that you've done through your own surveys, right? And then in terms of the facts, yeah, lots of different stuff you can see, like how often are they shopping in the store? Obviously, we saw the basket size there. You can look at how much do they go to the store, like how many trips are they making versus how big is the purchase they make when they're going, and see if there are any interesting insights in there. The penetration, right? How much of the like overall people have you gotten to actually buy something? And then the periods are really important too, because what we've looked at, I think, through this whole deck has been 52 weeks ending December in 2023. So that's the full year of data. But if you're looking for other cuts, like maybe something changed, obviously around COVID, there were a lot of spikes and dips, and maybe you actually have a story that like something crazy has happened in the last 6 months and you want to cut the data differently that way. So all of that you should consider when you're making your free report request or talking to the team here of like, okay, the data might not be, if I look at a full year, it's going to obfuscate what it is I think actually happened here. So maybe I want 12 weeks ending in March, or 6 months ending in, at the end of the year. So just make sure these are all the different ways you have to kind of like spin the cube when you're looking for insights. Okay, so did I miss anything there, Cara?
No, you hit it great. The one thing I'll add, at 𝐕𝐢𝐼Q, let's talk and customize it. It's not set. So just like, Daniel alluded to, if you have a 16-week promotional period you want to double click into, we can do that. So all of this is somewhat customized, and you can make your own retailers. And so we can work together to make sure whatever we're looking at is specifically tailored to you.
All right. Now I'm going to hit some of the questions then that have come in. So one question is around 𝐕𝐲𝑆 versus kind of like full hog Nielsen. What's actually available in 𝐕𝐲𝑆 versus where you need to kind of go more custom with the panel team?
Yeah, definitely. Pulled up the 𝐕𝐲𝑆 slide. So 𝐕𝐲𝑆 is a platform that NielsenIQ created to really help emerging brands make data a lot more easy and accessible. So that's number one. It's a little bit more of a limited scope to everything that NielsenIQ has to offer, especially when it comes to panel. It helps you just scratch the surface if we're talking specifically consumer panel. You'll see here there's a few reports, demographics, decomp trees. So they're scratching the surface of panel reports. We have our other platform at NielsenIQ called Discover, integrates all of our data sources together and just has a lot more flexibility, deeper analyses and things like that. So if you're not sure which which platform is best for you. Myself and the teams are all happy to kind of help and ensure that we find the right solution for you.
And just from my personal experience, like I would go into that 𝐕𝐲𝐬 report myself first and just see what is there and if it's useful for you. If there's some cut that you think would be golden that you're not going to get, like probably for an early brand, you're not, I mean, platform access to discover is going to be very expensive, but people like Mark can be very helpful of just giving you probably a specific cut. Like, hey, man, I just need you to send me an Excel that has this one retailer, this one thing, these categories, and they'll send you an Excel that shows you exactly what you're going to get. Like, okay, that's what you want. Okay. So that can be a good way to get a little bit scrappier with your data purchase. Okay, we get to more questions here. So what about e-com versus in-store? Do you see, like, have you seen anything like really being different in terms of the panel data in certain categories, or just like overall e-com versus in-store purchases in terms of the makeup of the shoppers?
Yeah, 100% yes. I think I hear a lot around the industry lately of, oh, now that we're in the post-COVID era, online isn't important anymore. It's just as important. Whether online includes Instacart or Amazon, especially once consumers have found a product they love, auto ship. That's a huge thing. And so that's different ways that we can at Nielsen IQ kind of look at the data and even see our consumers shifting from starting their purchase in store to shifting it online. Where are they purchasing it online, whether that's pickup and delivery, pickup in store, or if it's shipped to home. So there's a lot of different options that we can kind of look into, but in a lot of categories, we do see significant differences in the way consumers shop. I'll tell you, online often has higher basket sizes. So putting your product online, people are more likely to purchase more at one time.
People's basket overall is higher in e-com versus, I guess that kind of makes sense, because I mean, if I go online, I'm not typically going and buying like one thing. I don't know. I mean, you got minimums you got to hit. Whereas, I mean, if you go and stand in the grocery store, you do see plenty of people, especially if it's like a lunch crowd, just coming in and getting a sandwich and a drink and getting out of there, which will take the basket size way down, right? So if you're doing an e-com shop, like you're doing a shop probably, or at least getting a certain minimum number of items. Because even if, I don't know if, I mean, Amazon, I guess, does let you buy kind of one thing, but usually that's not why you're going on there if you're going grocery shopping.
And it's even for multiples of one product too. I think naturally online, you see 6-packs, not like one individual. So naturally, it's also a higher purchase size per specific item too.
Yeah. So have you looked at some other, within functional beverage or also outside of like the non-alc category? Obviously, a lot of non-alc brands have come up over the last few years. Have you seen anything in that you could recollect? And also, what about alc as well?
Yeah. Did you know that I've been doing an outreach on specifically non-alc? It's definitely a big topic. Non-alc is becoming more and more, not only on alcohol brands having a non-alc line, but even like Waterloo, for example, has a pina colada flavor and things like that. So non-alc is reaching the total beverage, not just on the alc. So that's a huge trend. And I would say that's definitely a little bit more in store. Consumers are trying it, but in the sense of we saw a huge spike with like oh my gosh, dry January, and it's kind of continued throughout this year. So that's a big thing that my team and the 𝐕𝐝𝐲𝐬 team have really been focusing analyses on. Is important to note for sure.
Okay. A couple of questions that are about specific categories. So I would probably ask you guys to go back and look at, or maybe contact the 𝐕𝐲𝐬𝐬 team to get a demo looking at your specific area. Oh, before I forget, Cara, please let's make that the next webinar, going through the non-alc stuff and looking at your
Sure.
findings, because boy, I'm interested in that. And I think that's the main stuff. So I know there are a bunch of other questions, guys, that came in, but again, I would ask maybe if you go and take advantage of your free 𝐕𝐲𝐬𝐬 reports because of the partnership with Startup CPG. I'm going to paste that here one more time. So if you were looking at, like, I wanted to see more sweet snacks for salty, like, that would be a good time to go ahead and try to do that. And so, Cara, I just want to thank you. I know this is a tough one to get through because there's so many data points and so many people sitting on the edge of their seats wanting to ask a follow-up question that's really relevant to their brand. What I would ask everybody is, please, if you could give me some feedback on this session and stuff that, like, we want to do our best for you guys to make it broadly interesting, but also like get some specific stuff in here. So if you have any, specific feedback for me on this one, please feel free to shoot me a note, maybe on Slack, and just say what you would like to see next. Because we really, really thank 𝐕𝐢𝐝 for freeing the data for a bunch of us and giving us some really important snippets to use. If I were still, running a company, I would have been taking a lot of notes and taking this right to the buyer. So thank you. Cara, any last words?
No, thank you all. I appreciate it. I know we sent out information, so feel free to reach out. We're always willing to kind of spend some time talking about your business.
All right, great. Thank you again, Cara and 𝐕𝐢𝐝 team. I love data. I've been your host, Daniel, big data fan, and I will see you guys on the next one, non-alc deep dive. All right, bye everybody.
Bye.